In our country, you could be of any background, any heritage or faith. Um, as long as you're qualified and you work hard, you're sincere, um, you get to serve at any level in a country, including the highest level. And I recognized pretty early on that that principle was also at stake in my process. And I had to do justice to that and make sure that my children or the next generation at large doesn't get this wrong message. Somehow there are some things that you don't get to do because you are of certain backgrounds. And that's not who we are as a country. And so with that principle, with the focus on preserving that principle, I threw all I had. I organized. I put together a coalition.
I'm Simi Shaw, and welcome to South Asian Trailblazers. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Season 8 of South Asian Trailblazers. I am so excited to welcome a very special guest today, and that is Mr. Dilawar Syed. And first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. We are sitting here today at Wharton, his alma mater. He had just recently spoke to a number of my classmates, and now I'm excited to dig into the longer arc of his story. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about him. Dilawar Syed is the Deputy Administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administration, a role he was nominated into by President Joe Biden. He came to the SBA from the State Department, where he served as Special Representative for Commercial and Business Affairs. As the State Department's top commercial diplomat, he advocated for U.S. companies to compete and win abroad, and helped ensure U.S. competitiveness in markets across the world. Before joining the Biden administration, he held the role of CEO at Lumiata, an AI healthcare company, and president at the software company Freshworks. Earlier in his career, he also oversaw business operations for Yahoo's platforms and infrastructure and was a product manager at Siebel Systems and SAP. His career, as you might have noted, is marked by the worlds of tech and public service. And in public service, he has done work both at the federal and state levels, as well as the local level. He was the founding chair of the California Entrepreneurship Task Force with their governor's office, served on President Obama's White House Commission on AAPIs, and chaired the White House Initiative on AAPI's Economic Growth Committee. In 2020, he was tapped by the mayor of San Jose to help lead Silicon Valley's pandemic recovery as a member of the Silicon Valley Recovery Roundtable. As I said, he holds an MBA from Wharton and also earned a BA in economics and computer science from UT Austin. Administrator Syed, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Simi.
So I want to start at the beginning of your journey, which actually begins in Pakistan. You were born there, and then you immigrated to the United States. How did your upbringing shape your career aspirations?
Again, thanks for the opportunity to speak. Look, we are a product of our upbringing and our lived experiences. I'm an immigrant. I came to US when I was an international student. And my actually, before I went to UT, I was called the Worcester in Worcester, Ohio, which is a rural part of Ohio. So my exposure, my foray, if you will, into what became my journey as an American was in the Midwest. And experiences growing up in Pakistan, which is obviously the South Asian, we can connect on so many levels.
Of course.
To this day, those values, are part of who I am. But then connecting around those values of where the families are a big part of who you are. That's what I saw in the Midwest, and quite frankly, in so many ways, was able to connect. And I often tell people one of the best places to, start your life as an American is to come to the heartland of the United States,
Wow.
which is where people are, people keep people first. And it's interesting today because I'm in this role, as part of federal government, and when I travel, a lot of my travel has been in what I consider to be underserved regions and rural parts of this country. I sort of, it's a full circle going back to, these communities that frankly, over the last couple of decades or so, had to kind of come back, with the loss of manufacturing and industry and what has happened both through COVID years. So, I feel very privileged to be in a position to be able to give back to these communities where I started.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you're able to connect with those people a lot more having spent so much of your life in the Midwest.
That's right. That's right.
I'm curious, based on your time in the Midwest, you then go and study economics and CS at UT Austin. You go get your MBA at Wharton. How did those academic experiences start to give shape to your career path?
So I think first working backwards, if you will, first Wharton experience. We were talking earlier was a very humbling one. I would just tell myself, my goodness, how did I get here? Because everyone was smarter around me. But it is an experience when you go to a school of this credibility and people obviously have come from all sorts of background, and it's a very diverse class when it comes to various industries that you learn. You sort of get a very broad view of the industry, and you learn. The learning happens from both in classroom and who your classmates are. To this day, that is helping me in my career, both first as an entrepreneur and now as a public servant. And then I think undergrad, obviously, University of Texas at Austin is one of our nation's largest public
Yeah.
universities. I personally believe that there's a lot of growth that happens when you go to a big public school, and you have to be very resourceful and very
Course.
entrepreneurial, to get the most of those schools, and that experience. Um, I think it made me resourceful, and I built that muscle that I deploy today as a public servant. Right, when you have so many tools at your disposal, the government is huge. Just the number of agencies that we have, and work with local and state, and be able to connect dots, be able to make sure that we all can, how do we bring those resources to bear? I mean, again, those muscles you build when you're a student, and you have 60,000 people around you. I remember one of the dorms that I had friends. That dorm had its own zip code.
Oh my gosh.
So and that's what you get trained early years. Having come to this country as an immigrant. So
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious, looking back at 18-year-old you stepping in foot in Austin for the first time, did you ever imagine that you would be the highest ranking Muslim official in the US government?
I don't think so. But I always had a passion for serving. Believe it or not, when I came to Worcester first, this is where I was, I ran for student government
Oh, wow.
and the student senate in my week number 3. Not just at Worcester College, but in this country. I think there is, if you have a leaning to serve, and you think of how do I help improve whatever is around me, whether it's my college campus or my company or society, that is transferable from place to place. And I felt from those early days as well that being able to lead, being able to do more with my life than just if you would go to school, that was how I operated. Um, and obviously, I didn't know where this would lead to, but I felt very strongly, and that has been sort of part of my story in my career as well, is that you have to give along the way. In business too, people often think, well, I want to give back. And I often have questioned that and say, well, you don't have to wait to get to a certain point.
Interesting.
You give along the way because, frankly, as people, we're privileged. As we
Of
speak,
course.
we have access to opportunities, in this case, access to education, institutions. And I was just lucky, to be in those places. So how do I make the most of that? And don't wait for a certain time or a certain milestone to say, I'm going to turn it around and start to serve. But you go and you do this along the way. And by the way, through that whole journey, you learn.
Yeah.
You learn and you grow. So whether it ran for student government called the Worcester in 1991, just literally have just arrived in the United States, I bet you things that I learned at the time were connecting with these people who were very new to me.
Yeah.
That is helping me today when I go across the country, in whether it's disaster zones or talk to entrepreneurial communities that are very different, in places where I spent most of my career in this country.
Absolutely. Now, not 10 years after you ran for student government, you're sitting here at Wharton as an MBA student, and 9/11 happens. And something that I've realized in doing this podcast over the last number of years is 9/11 is a shape-shifting moment for a lot of our trailblazers. Can you speak to how that impacted you and your trajectory and what it was like to be on this campus at that time?
Well, the world changed on 9/11. It was the first day of our recruiting in the second year. And we know this, that that's the day probably many MBAs consider to be the most critical day of their life.
Wow.
It was Tuesday, and I still remember we had we had this leadership class. We'd finished during the Vance Hall, and we came out, and I saw on those monitors, the second tower coming down. I still remember that moment, and there was this gasp in this crowd that was around this TV, and my daughter at the time was 1 year old. We lived in a high rise in central Philadelphia, and there was these reports that the fourth plane was still missing and most likely was heading towards Philadelphia.
Oh, wow.
And my immediate thought was that I need to go and get my daughter and my wife, and we should just figure out what to do. And I'll tell you, Simi, it was once I got to my place and we were evacuating, you literally had a sea of humanity on the streets of Philadelphia, not knowing what was happening. The
Wow.
world changed, obviously our country changed. We lost alumni. Um, I had just finished my internship. There were people that I had been talking to. I knew them who were Wharton alumni who were lost in those buildings. And this is the class, by the way, that had entered the Wharton program, MBA program, when our economy was at the top. If you may recall, and you may read history books, the dot-com
Yep.
bubble was building. This is when Amazon was launched. This is the time when Yahoo came online. This is very big for Google. So I'm aging myself. And I remember our dean telling us, you know what, this is the best time to start your MBA. The incoming class that we were the year before us, they had 800 plus offers from McKinsey.
Oh my God.
Everyone in school got an offer from a
That was your
certain
dream right
firm.
now for a lot of people.
And in addition to obviously the horrible tragedy that country witnessed, our economy crashed, and some of the first jobs to go away were MBA post-grad jobs. A third of our class did not have, only a third of the class had a job offer.
Wow.
But more importantly, these people came together. They had their backs, for each other. Our class is considered to be one of the most giving classes in 2002. There are some alumni my class members who have done amazing things, and overall it worked out. But it was a moment where we bonded. We came together for each other, and it was a reminder what really matters.
Yeah.
How do you build a community out of a very difficult time, a shared tragedy, and for me as well at the time, it was another reminder why uh, I had to do more than just go to business school and lead a career. We saw communities of color. We saw South Asians, especially Muslim Americans, Arab Americans. There was hate crimes. I personally witnessed them. I personally experienced some of that. And in many ways, in part, what I'm doing today, that moment was a shift for me as well, to pursue something beyond just business, where we have a voice at the table, where we can represent these communities and make sure that from this horrible tragedy for this country, we come together and we do better with each other.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it was a critical moment for just not obviously myself, but the whole community.
Yeah. I'm curious then how that translates to some of the next steps you took. I mean, what's interesting about your career is you decided to pursue tech after school. And while that might be a very popular career path today, it certainly wasn't back then. What inspired that path? How did you feel coming out of school? Especially because I believe prior to school, you'd spent most of your time in management consulting.
Correct. So I actually wanted to go tech. I actually studied at venture at Wharton. I studied entrepreneurship. I also did strategy, and I went on to work for Siebel Systems in product management. And it was, I still feel very strongly that one of the best jobs you can do early in your career is to be a product manager. You learn
Oh,
to be a
interesting.
CEO because you don't as a product manager, you work with everyone in the company. And I was trained at Siebel that as a PM, you are the CEO of your business. And that framing stuck with me. And it helped me when I went on the entrepreneurial route and when I became a CEO. And it's helping me even today. And again, how to be resourceful when you don't have many resources.
Yeah.
When no one reports to you yet, you need your sales team to sell your product. You need your channel to make sure your product gets out there. And you develop this skill set, how to work with people, how to collaborate, how to have a mission. And so that was a great way to, go to the industry in the tech world um, as a product manager. And then I went from software to Yahoo, which was a more of a scale experience to be able to build platforms for Yahoo's shared services.
Absolutely. And your experience is pretty wide ranging in that you've worked at the Yahoos of the world, but you've also gone and worked at more startup oriented companies like Lumiata and Freshworks. Can you speak to some of your more memorable experiences working in this industry?
I think one of the most memorable one is, or I would say one of the most um, experience that actually I found to be most impactful is my work at Freshworks. Freshworks is now a public company, but when I joined, it was a small team based out of India. It was founded in Chennai, India. The company does customer service, sales and marketing products for the main street businesses, small and medium businesses. Consider a Salesforce enterprise grade software, but for the small medium businesses. And this was again a, a startup that came out of India, and I joined early. I was pretty much the first employee for US and helped
Wow.
take company global and built what has now become one of the fastest growing software service companies in the world. We had an IPO in September 2021. um, the experience of working with a small team and then going through that very high growth experience, working very hard to make sure we maintain a culture, given especially the fact that the company had its roots in India. And as someone who's a South Asian American myself, I was able to understand that and appreciate that and make sure that as we build the company and as we scale ourselves, we also scale the culture.
Yeah.
So again, going back to you asked me earlier, our roots are, our roots have a, have a reason sometimes to be able to come back full circle and help us, even when you're running businesses. So that was the most, I would say, one of the most memorable experiences, the one that I cherish. I'm still in touch with the team.
Wow.
It's a very close knit culture.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I'm curious. I mean, in a lot of these companies, you were tapped for the role of president and CEO and very senior roles. What do you think it is about your career specifically that you did to set yourself up for that level of success?
So I think obviously, when you're joining a company that is young, I had before, for example, because of Freshworks, I'd been at Siebel, I'd been at SAP. I had done enterprise grade work at Yahoo as well. So I had the domain experience and knowledge. Uh, but it was also me wanting to push myself and say that I want to go do this. Because I'll give you one instance is after Yahoo, um, I actually left and took over a company called Yonja, which is a social network in
Yeah.
emerging markets. And it was backed by Tiger Global. And this is the time when you had vertical social networks emerging around the world. There was one in Brazil, there's one in Middle East and Turkey region. And I wanted to have that leadership experience and entrepreneurial, more startup-y world. So I sought that. And I think, again, you have to sort of make sure that you're stepping up and positioning yourself to be able to get those leadership roles. They're not going to come to you. You have to take risks. And I could have stayed on Yahoo. They actually had offered me something pretty amazing.
Wow.
But I said, no, you know what? I would rather go and work in a small venture and build that and work with an amazing investing team. And Tiger Global was, at the time and still is one of the largest investors in
Yes.
tech. And that set me up with Freshworks because Freshworks was backed by Tiger Global. Freshworks was Tiger Global's first SaaS investment.
Wow. I
And
didn't know
and
that.
and so obviously, my experience with domain helped, but having placed myself in this world of the venture community.
Sure.
Where Lee Fixel, who was our investor, had seen me, and we got to know each other, and he felt that I would be able to bring what this company needed, both from my experience, but also the fact that I understood the culture, being a South Asian, and the fact that Freshworks had a very strong, roots in India.
Yeah. It's so fascinating because it's clear to me that you're someone that seeks out opportunities that resonate with your values. And it sounds like you were in this established tech culture, but you sought out something more entrepreneurial. And at the same time, this is also when you started to seek out roles in the world of civil service. I believe around your time at Freshworks is when you went and served on President Obama's commission around Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Did you start to have this inkling of this is something I now want to pivot to in my life? I mean, how did that start?
So the pivot happened much earlier. That
Okay.
it actually happened back in Worcester, and
The student government.
as mentioned, I've had a civic track throughout. This goes back to 2008, when President Obama first decided to run for the presidency, and I got involved very early days when it was during the primary season, and he was competing with the Secretary of State. And I will tell you, I met him at an event in San Francisco, and I fell in love. I
Wow.
was like, there is something special and magical about his candidacy, and the idea that he was the first Black, candidate, that something mattered to me, and I threw all that I had in that domain. And I'll tell you frankly, right now, obviously, we are in another campaign season. The Barack Obama's campaign was truly, truly, truly special. I still remember November 4th, Hyde Park in Chicago. It was a very mild evening. And when he comes on stage with his family, and there's a famous picture of Oprah crying. I was pretty close to her. I still had that, I
You
get
know what it feels
goosebumps
like. You remember it.
seeing this man, African American president that we elected, and what is possible in this country. And I will tell you, that was the evening where, if I go back in my life as an American, that I truly, truly internalized my being an American, because I could see this country could elect an African American as a president, and I probably made a deeper commitment to pursue service in a more broader way. Um, so this was something, I think, that was sort of a catalyst, his election, and I was privileged that he appointed me to be the commissioner. And this, by the way, if you recall, this is the financial crisis, because the president just inherited financial crisis, and we were, at the time, there was a stimulus act that was passed to help the economy, and I was one of the folks who was helping connect Asian American communities, API entrepreneurs, with federal investment that were coming in. And so that experience of traveling to the country as a commissioner, talking to communities, bridging resources with SBA at the time, and Commerce Department, and our very, very diverse communities. One, I learned about how much resource the government has. Second, I learned how diverse our communities are, and they were all widespread. And third, I learned they didn't know how to access government. And so that was a growth experience for me as a public servant. Even though it was not a full-time public service role, I was still running a company as CEO.
Yeah.
But it laid the seeds, or laid the groundwork of me pursuing this. And to this day, I bring that customer in perspective, because I spent that time going around the country, seeing what the needs were, and how much gap there was in awareness, and how much resource there was, both from the investment the president was making, but from the programming perspective as well, at SBA and other agencies.
Yeah, super interesting. I mean, I'm curious though, you're the seasoned tech operator, you're serving on this task force and commission with President Obama, but eventually you do decide to take the plunge and go full time in this world. And you join the State Department as their top commercial diplomat. And what motivated that? Did you ever look back and say, am I making the right decision here?
Oh, I always felt that, first of all, I feel privileged that I was in a position to be appointed into these roles, to represent the United States globally at the State Department. It's an incredible privilege to wear the U.S. flag and
Yeah.
represent the country. I mean, I obviously was pleased with that. I wanted to make sure, though, that I'm delivering for this. And that mindset of delivery and of serving, it comes from my own values. I don't take anything for granted. Someone of my background and the journey that I've had, it's a privilege to be able to be in this in a role like this within the State Department or at the SBA, and we want to make sure that whatever time we have, years, months, days, we make the most of it, and we make sure people know how they can benefit from often the services that they pay for as taxpayers. So I feel quite a burden on my shoulders. And secondly, I will also say, because we are still on a journey of um, of building representation for our communities that we come from, there's an added burden that as an Asian American, as a Muslim American, as a South Asian American, that I want to make sure that people can see
Yeah.
that this is what diversity in government does for all communities. So if there's any burden that I felt which is that how do we make the most of this opportunity? How do we deliver? How do we close the gap of awareness? How do we make sure people benefit from these resources? And we do it in a way that frankly open up pathways for more people who have had my journey to be able to serve in the future.
I love that. Was there an adjustment period? Did you feel like you had to climb this steep learning curve and going from the fast-paced world of tech to the more slower moving world of government?
It's interesting. I hear you in this question. I'm often asked that, what did you find? How did you
I mean,
transition?
it's a big transition.
I actually didn't find the transition to be that challenging in the sense, because I look at, if you have value systems, in my case, my value system, if you will, as a business leader, as an entrepreneur, has always been, or I strive to, customer first, people first, bias for action. Those value systems are transferable from a big company to a startup, from a startup to
Fascinating.
while it may not necessarily render itself it doesn't manifest exactly, but you can take that. And you also have to be humbled about this, that you cannot necessarily replicate um, things with the same degree of speed and execution has happened. But believe it or not, if you are serious about this and you're sincere with this value system, you will find people in government who are also delivery mindset, that they will work with you and you can get stuff done. So I have stayed true, and I strive to stay true to those value systems, and so I found this journey to be fulfilling. And it's also very gratifying when you know that you can actually move things faster, when government is often not known for that.
Yeah. It sounds like you were able to turn it more into an advantage than anything and never actually held you back coming from the private sector in such a differentiated background.
Uh, Look, I mean, I thrive on taking on challenges. That's what we are. That's what we are trained on as entrepreneurs, and so
Yeah,
you're
you're preaching to the
how these challenges. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, in 2021, President Biden nominates you to the role of Deputy Administrator of the Small Business Administration, one of the largest government agencies. And what happened next is a very arduous confirmation process. Can you tell us about the emotions that you felt during those 2 years and how you decided to stay focused and committed to this role?
I think you have to separate yourself from what is this process and what the goal is and what this is about. So I chose to serve. The president asked me to serve. We had met him. I met him early days of 2020 campaign in a boba tea shop.
Of course.
Our organization at the time endorsed him, and he had a nice conversation. He said, "Look, if I get elected, I'd like for you to come and serve and help me." And I said, "Absolutely, sir." And obviously that happened. So the goal was that we want a representative government. We want a diverse cabinet. Also, remember, this is post-pandemic. A lot of rebuilding, a lot of recovery had to be done. I also felt very strongly that people in business need to lend their skill set to government. Not many business people serve. Not many Wharton MBAs have gone on to do, build ventures, have gone on to public service.
Yeah, you're a bit of a unicorn.
Well, and I don't want to be unicorn.
Yeah.
More should follow me, right? I expect you to fall upon it, right? So look, I mean, that was the goal was. So when I ran into those challenges, I I separated my personal from that goal. I also recognized pretty early on that a lot of what I was facing was unfortunately sending a wrong message to communities where I come from. And I will tell you, Simi, that was probably the most important factor. I had to get through this.
What was that message?
The message was that in our country, you could be of any background, any heritage or faith. Um, as long as you're qualified and you work hard, you're sincere, um, you get to serve at any level in a country, including the highest level. And I recognized pretty early on that that principle was also at stake in my process. And I had to do justice to that and make sure that my children or the next generation at large doesn't get this wrong message. Somehow there were some things that you don't get to do because you are of certain backgrounds. And that's not who we are as a country. And so with that principle, with the focus on preserving that principle, I threw all I had. I organized. I put together a coalition. A coalition that was multi-faith, that was multi-ethnic, that
Wow.
was led by U.S. Chamber of Commerce, um, eh, local elected officials, 200 plus organizations, and we went through it. And and I also learned through that. That was a growth experience for myself, how to stay focused on a mission and persist and don't let anyone tell you this is not possible. Now, the good news is this: once you get through on the other side, this entire coalition, this entire network that comes together on shared values becomes your your network and your resource for you to now deliver. And that's why, frankly, I've been fortunate to be able to go into communities and do all that we have done. I've been to 30 states almost in a year and a half.
Wow.
I've done hundreds of events, Black community, Hispanic community, AAPI communities, talk about loan programs, contracts, innovation. And also people expect me to because they know what I was going through, right? And they were there along the way. So, um, it's a journey, but there are clearly um, uh, you know, you can benefit from that coalition that comes together when it times to deliver.
Absolutely. And you alluded to this a little bit with traveling to all these different countries and doing your service with these communities, spreading knowledge about what the SBA is, what they offer. I want to back up a second. For those who aren't familiar, can you explain what your role is and what your general mandate is?
So at SBA, as a deputy administrator, I partner with the administrator to help run the agency. SBA, as folks may be familiar with, has funding programs. We did nearly $56 billion worth of funding to small businesses, startups in this past year. Second, we are responsible for making sure the federal government contracts go to small businesses in with their fair share. Last year, we did a record number of almost 28% that went to small businesses. The total of $7 billion, $700 billion in federal government contracts. We provide technical assistance, mentorship. Every single metro region in the country has an SBA office. And finally, we have innovation programs with grants like SBIR, SCTR, which are non-dilutive to your cap table to help you build, commercialize,
We
deep
love
science
non-dilutive.
projects. We backed venture funds. So look, there is breadth of resources. The challenge is awareness. We still have long ways to go when it comes to the communities of color, women, veteran entrepreneurs, to be able to get access to resources in an equitable fashion. As an example, one thing that I focus on a lot is Black entrepreneurship. Last year of the total $56 billion, our financing of Black-owned businesses is around $1.5 billion. It's almost a record, but frankly, nearly not enough.
Yeah.
And we are not going to be successful until our Black brothers and sisters succeed and have the same potential that everyone else does. And they are, frankly, overcoming systemic barriers. historic barriers. So a lot of my work is around helping ensure that we drive awareness, you strike partnership with HBCUs or Divine Nine or Black Muslim leadership councils of the world to have those connection in the community to make sure these folks can benefit from our resources. Expand the network of SBA lenders to include lenders. Like I know your family businesses there as well. These banks who bank with these underserved communities. So a lot of intentionality has to go into it. So that's my role, and we get to do all of this with the help of the team.
Doesn't seem like you have enough on your plate.
There is quite a.
So before the SBA, when you were at the State Department as the special representative for commercial and business affairs, you were advocating for U.S. business abroad. I'm curious how those experiences shaped your approach to U.S. small business policy domestically.
So at State Department, this office that I ran, and it's almost a unique place where businesses were part of a tool set, if you will, for making the United States more competitive, and as part of national security. The U.S. leads the world in innovation and business, but we cannot take that for granted, especially in an increasingly competitive global marketplace. China, some of our competition, but also some of our friends. We can no longer take it for granted that we will get the first right to do business in emerging countries. So you have to show up. So I helped push the U.S. private sector interest on behalf of the Secretary around the world, 24 countries in 15 months, and especially focused on Africa and Southern Europe and Gulf countries, South America, where frankly sometimes we are competing and China has an upper hand. This is the national security priority as well. It's a competitive priority. But when you look at all of this, you can't just look at big business. You also have to make sure that entrepreneurs and innovators are part of that. When you look at innovation that has in the last 20, 30 years, it has come from smaller companies first before it came from, before the larger enterprises adopted it. Look at OpenAI, right? They've changed the world when it comes to generative AI. In the world that I was in software before I did an AI company, it was smaller SaaS companies who were leading the charge, not larger enterprise software companies with software.
Interesting.
So you want to make sure that then small businesses and startups are also part of our strategy to ensure U.S. competitiveness around the world. And so at SBA, we have an international trade office, and I'm hoping that we can grow this office and make sure that we are pushing entrepreneur-led innovation from the United States as a tool, if you will, to make us more competitive globally and to ensure that our national security is strong.
Interesting. So you start domestically in hopes that there's sort of a echo effect.
And actually encourage them to go global soon and help them with various export financing programs and other tools we have across the U.S. government that they can do business abroad. That before another competitor product from another part of the world is adopted by a firm in Qatar or in Brazil, they know that here's a U.S. startup that is offering this. And that requires work.
Yep.
That requires helping ensure we are helping develop standards, let's say for AI, that the world adopts, that standards that are more in the image of U.S. values versus another competitor.
I want to come to this conversation on AI in a second, but first I want to ask, you've been in this role for over a year now. Are there any particular initiatives or policies that you're proud of having implemented?
There's quite a few, but in the interest of time, I'll focus on one, which is federal government contracts. I mentioned this earlier. The U.S. government spends $700 billion a year on buying all sorts of things and is the largest purchaser in the world. It's a huge resource and traditionally has not been factually equitably shared with small businesses, and especially with minority-owned businesses. I have been passionate about helping ensure that the Black community gets their fair share of this national resource that we have, because it's a national resource. President Biden actually committed to making sure that 15% of all federal government contracts go towards socially economically disadvantaged businesses, including Black businesses. And in fact, he made that promise, Simi, by visiting Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is the site of Black Wall Street
Former
that was
Black Wall Street.
burned down 100 years ago. By the way, I often say this, that even if a couple of those companies had survived, they could have today $500 billion in market cap, right? So we have a lot of folks to make whole, given what this country has experienced in our Black neighborhoods. So we have done a good job in growing the share of federal government contracts towards these communities. Our goal is to get to 15% in the year 2025. There are specific things that I have done in terms of, number one, this program called 8A, which faced some judicial challenges. It's a minority-focused procurement vehicle. We made sure the program stayed active, in fact, grows despite judicial challenges. It's how you get these government contracts. It's a part of the work the team has done there, and also some other rules that we had to help ensure they get implemented, which direct federal government agencies to do business with minority entrepreneurs. So that's the work that I feel very strongly about, amongst some other things.
I love that. I'm curious, do you feel that your identity as an immigrant, as a South Asian, continues to really push forward the work that you do in these spaces, particularly in serving underserved communities, even if it's not necessarily our own?
Absolutely. Look, I'm an outsider. Remember, I landed as a freshman in college at Worcester, Ohio. And so when you're on the outside and you have the perspective and you have to work your way up, and sometimes you have to work, frankly, a lot harder to be able to have access to the opportunity. You understand what it takes when you are not on the table. While I absolutely cannot even imagine the pain and suffering that folks in the Black community have experienced over hundreds of years, I have an appreciation that as an immigrant myself, that there's a lot you have to do to get in. And secondly, let me just say this to you as well, as a South Asian, and I say this to a lot to our communities. This community stands on the shoulder of civil rights leaders.
Absolutely.
Had it not been for the civil rights movement, many of us who've come to this country and made it home, we wouldn't be here. And I don't think that sometimes is fully appreciated in this community. So I'll be honest with you, we owe it to a Black brother and sister. And so absolutely, my own journey and where I am, and also what I've gone through in recent years, all of that is something that I sort of becomes a fuel for me to keep working with the help of our team and my colleagues in government to help ensure that we're driving a more inclusive growth.
Yeah.
Right. And make sure everyone who's an aspiring entrepreneur or innovator has access to opportunity, has access to resources that they're paying for as taxpayers, by the way.
Yeah. To that end, I mean, something that we're starting to see as both a potential headwind and tailwind for small businesses is AI. You have a robust background in the world of tech. What do you view, where do you see AI stacking up in terms of how it's going to impact small businesses, particularly from your new vantage point at the SBA?
I actually think, first of all, needless to say, the AI's impact is going to be multifold on society and business than we saw with even in software, right? And this generation, we all have gone through that. I think it's an opportunity for us to embrace AI as a small business community earlier than, frankly, what we did in case of social media. I have seen AI as power to be a co-pilot when it comes to developing your marketing plan. The speed with which these products can share with you how you advertise, where you should go and advertise, how much budget you need. I mean, in the world before generative AI, you would spend weeks and months and a lot of money to be able to get that develop the marketing plan. So I encourage small business owners, no matter what type of business it is, to learn how to use these tools effectively and use it as a tool to recruit people, develop your sales plan, marketing plans. And part of our job at SBA and government is to make sure that we are helping educate the small business community around it. So we have SCORE chapters, which are board mentors, and many of them are running classes on AI. We also are forming alliances with big tech to make sure that they are, deliberately training the community on AI tools.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And we actually had another Wharton alum who is leading go-to-market at OpenAI actually use very similar language and saying that AI is really intended to be a co-pilot. It's not meant to replace people. It's really meant to be additive. And it's just a little bit about us adopting that perspective, given so much of multimedia has pushed this narrative that tech and AI is out to get us over the last few decades. When this episode airs, the US election will be behind us. And I'm curious what your general outlook is on the future of the SBA, but also your future professional career. VP Harris recently announced that it was a record lending year for the SBA. Currently, the SBA is fighting for funds from Congress in the wake of Hurricanes Helene and Milton. What is top of mind for you?
So I'm speaking out in official capacity, so I'm going to not talk about anything campaign related. What I can tell you is when you look at over the last near 4 years of this president's term, we have seen a record number of small businesses created, 19.5 million, and the count keeps going up. Million founders have started a business, in part because when you look at the investments the president and the vice president made with the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act, infrastructure law, bipartisan infrastructure law, Inflation Reduction Act, these investments are building new industries in EVs and batteries. You look at here in the state of Pennsylvania, where I am right now, $19.3 billion worth of money has come into public infrastructure, almost $5 billion in private investment made possible because of this. So when you have all this major infusion to build industry of the future, it also creates an entrepreneurial stimulus. And that's why you see there's millions of new founders. Now, our job as an agency that is responsible for small business and entrepreneurship in this country, is to make sure these founders have access to resources and tools to be able to become viable businesses, right? And that's where we are coming in. That's why we are democratizing access to funding, creating new lending partnerships, simplifying our loan process to encourage more small dollar lending, easing the federal government contracting process for communities of color who want to be in contracting. And that's why you're seeing the results in lending record numbers. And that's something I expect to continue. We build the foundation. This agency, as you may recall, in the pandemic, had to step up.
Absolutely.
Helped make sure this country's economy survives.
PPP,
idle loans, $1.2 trillion worth of COVID relief. Simi was channeled through the SBA in the pandemic years when we took over.
I saw it impact a lot of my own family members.
Absolutely. And we have taken those lessons, built the platforms, literally both technology, but also into the partnerships. And now we're seeing this amazing demand of entrepreneurship and making sure that our core offerings are scaling in the same way. But we're going to get out there, make sure people know these things exist, these resources exist. That's why I spend so much time on the ground, helping connect those dots. Finally, speaking of disaster, this is something many folks may not realize. SBA is a frontline disaster agency. We deploy ourselves along with FEMA whenever disasters strike. Right now, you have Milton and Helene, ravaged communities in the South.
Yeah.
I was in Georgia and North Carolina very recently. And a lot of these are communities of color, and they are disproportionately impacted. SBA has received more than 80,000 applications. We're getting 3,000 applications per day from these communities, both from residents and small businesses. We've made $50 million worth of loans offers already. We are waiting for Congress to replenish SBA funds. We're confident that would happen. The president has been very clear about this. Speaker Johnson has also said that, it's a matter of time that Congress will do it. So I would encourage who is listening in the near term that if you're impacted by disaster, visit sba.gov/disaster and apply for the funding. If you do not need it, you obviously don't have to accept the loan, but you want to make sure that we are there for our communities in this very difficult time.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those resources. I have one last question for you today, and that is, when you were confirmed, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said you represent the true American success story. And I'm curious, looking back on your career thus far, what advice do you have for the young immigrants stepping in the US for the first time, for the young entrepreneurs, for the young MBA students like myself, based on what you've achieved and accomplished thus far?
My advice is aspire, but not just for yourself, but what you can do for those around you. I actually think sometimes when we aspire, frankly, just for ourselves, we're cutting ourselves short. It's an accident of birth or opportunity that we are here, or you have access to the Wharton education. There are smarter people who don't get that opportunity. So if we all can push ourselves to aspire for what we can do for others, doors will open for you that you absolutely cannot even imagine. And when you have that level of that spirit and it's combined with your skill and education, there is so much good that can happen. And that also is an amazingly growth experience for you. That's what I would say. And second, I would just say, let's believe in this country, anything is possible.
Yeah.
Anything is possible. And that principle is what we have to work very, very hard to maintain and preserve for all people,
Yeah.
no matter what their background or where they live. And that is going to be one of our core values and ideals that we're going to keep fighting for.
Yeah. Very powerful. Administrator Syed, thank you so much for joining me on Trailblazers today. It's such an honor to have you.
Thank you. Appreciate the good conversation.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you'll join our community at southasiantrailblazers.com. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and follow us at South Asian Trailblazers on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and any major platform. Here at South Asian Trailblazers, we're dedicated to elevating leading South Asians. Until next time.